If you're considering starting a podcast or a YouTube channel, I'm going to share with you what I've learned in my first year doing both. Hey everybody, I'm Mike Claudio, owner of WinRate Consulting and host of the Big Stud Sales podcast. So over the last year, I have put a very intentional approach on two platforms, primarily podcasts and YouTube. So I'm going to share with you today some things that I've learned, some of the results, some things that I think you should do when getting started that I wish I would have known when I got started. Because obviously it's grown pretty substantially. I'll tell you, my business has doubled year over year. I went from, low six figures to mid six figures, just giving you round numbers. And I think a primary focus on that and why that happened was because of my content distribution, the quality of my podcast and YouTube channel following. So to kind of give you some ideas, Big Stud Sales Podcast is I do with a co-host with Ryan, the guy back there. I also did Remodeling the Carolinas, which was an interview style podcast that was primarily for interviewing subject matter experts for supporting and helping the remodeling industry. And then my YouTube channel, which where you are right now, Mike Claudio. All of those started somewhat elementary. So if you look at my YouTube channel first, I started just basically using it as a public facing Dropbox. That was just, if I had a video I recorded I thought was worth anything, I put it on YouTube and hoped it turned into something. I will tell you that didn't work. Pretty aggressively didn't work. There was no good titles, there was no good thumbnails, there was no good searchability. It was just me putting content out there that just to start, I started creating videos literally on my laptop camera and putting it on YouTube. So over I would say my first YouTube video was released July 2018, and it wasn't until the end of 2019 that I started taking YouTube pretty seriously. And then really, it wasn't until mid 2020 when we really put a very direct effort on it. So what happened over that time period? So I started out with that initial 30 to 40 subscribers, which are like that low hanging, that tight knit group of people. And it grew to about 50 or 60 by the end of 2019. It was less than 100 at the end of 2019. So Ryan and I started taking a very intentional approach to YouTube. Obviously having Ryan helped me a lot. Ryan has educated himself a lot. So having an expert in your corner can go a long way, but many of us don't have access to that. So some things we learned. Making a thumbnail that pops is very important. If you look at my thumbnails now, they obviously catch the eye. Using titles that relate to searchability. What are people actually looking for, and what are people going to be asking YouTube that your content would relate to? And then we started putting a little bit of money behind it. Not a ton, less than $150 a month for the last 4 or 5 months. And so right now it is December 2020. I've grown my following, my subscribers on YouTube about 650 in that time period. So pretty aggressive growth, like a 10x growth this year, which isn't a huge, I don't have millions of subscribers, but it worked. And it's starting to lead to clients. I'm getting people reaching out saying, hey, I saw your YouTube video. Want to see if we could talk about what it would look like to work with you. I think that same approach goes with anybody who's trying to be a subject matter expert, which a lot of contractors and service providers are, especially in that design build realm. If you're a general contractor and you're trying to get multi-six-figure projects, letting people understand what makes you an expert is a lot easier through consistent content and video content. In my opinion, it's not for everybody, but I think it can be really good if you are comfortable articulating your message. So documenting that and starting a YouTube channel can be great for DIYs, things to think about, the biggest questions that your average client is asking. Here's another big part of it. When you create those, frequently asked question videos, those DIYs, those best practices, those things to think about videos, look back at your last couple of clients and figure out what are you saying repetitively? What are the questions you're asking or that you're answering all the time? That's kind of what I started doing. I was looking at my clients saying, my clients are asking about this. Let me put out content around it, which obviously other people in my target audience have the same questions, but then also I don't have to keep repeating myself. When people start having those questions, I can send them to the content, which leads them to other parts of my content. So it can be really good from that perspective. But first year, we're averaging 10 to 15,000 views a month right now. We're averaging about 130 to 150 new subscribers a month right now. The goal would be to get to, I think 2,000 subscribers by the end of 2021. So kind of 4 or 5 exit over the next year, which I think is very attainable. But ultimately that content going out, be intentional. But really what I missed on the front end when creating the YouTube channel was creating content that answered specific questions that people are actually searching for. the thumbnail is important, but not as important, I think, as being searchable. So what are the biggest questions you're asking on a regular basis? Because that's likely what people are typing into. What is the question to, or how do I, or what about this? Those are questions that people are actually typing into YouTube to figure it out. So don't need a high-end piece of equipment. You don't need high-end camera equipment. You can do it at home pretty slow. You can do it on a job site. You can do it with a GoPro. You don't need all of this to do it. It's helpful. It makes me look good. Ryan likes buying equipment, which really helps me because he keeps leveling up his equipment, which makes me look better. So I love that. But you don't need it to start. Get a GoPro. I wouldn't recommend like using your iPhone for something like this. Even that something in that sense of, a low-end $400 or $500 camera can go a long way from that perspective. But be intentional with what you're asking and what you're answering when you're creating your content. From a podcast perspective, in my opinion, there's kind of two types. I guess technically three. There's individual, just kind of rant style, where you're just talking into a microphone, putting content into the world. There's co-hosts, which Ryan and I basically sit down and we co-host the Big Stud Sales Podcast, where we put out marketing and sales advice. Every week we release an episode. And then Ramon in the Carolinas, for me, is my interview style. I think those are kind of the three style. My opinion, and honestly, I don't know what Ryan's opinion is on, I don't think you should blend those different types together. That's why I have two. I think people are either expecting interviews or people are expecting to hear the same person talk every week. So I created two for that purpose. But getting started was pretty simple. You can get a lot of the equipment you need for under $1,000 to start from home. I did not start there. I found an actual podcast studio in Charlotte that I could rent for $15 an hour. Let's take COVID and Corona out of it. There's likely a co-working space or something in your marketplace that you can rent that has all the podcast equipment there. You basically show up with a memory card, sit down, record a couple episodes, disperse them. I hired a podcast editor, and I can refer you to him. It's Shelby Rowe Productions. His name is Derek. He's an awesome guy. So basically I send him the raw content. He makes it all look good, puts the intro and outro on it, and sends it out for me for RTC. For Big Stud Sales, Ryan edits it, and my operations manager disperses it, but it's super simple to upload. I use Libsyn, Libsyn. It stands for Liberated Syndication, but super easy to upload from there, and you can future schedule them, so you can literally record 4 or 5 episodes, get them loaded in there, and have them release automatically. Pretty easy process there, but from that perspective, you need to understand who you're talking to. When starting either one of these, a podcast or a YouTube channel, it's very important to understand who your audience is and what you're telling them. What do you want them to get away from it? What do you want them to take away from it? What do you want to educate them on? What are you hoping they get by spending the time to engage? Because if you're not putting it out consistently, that's a big part of it too. Like, you got to be on a certain cadence. I will tell you, going from every other week to every week tripled or quadrupled our engagement level. It wasn't just there were more episodes. We got more people faster. To give you an idea, from Big Stud Sales, we hit the 14,000 download mark at I think the 13th or 14th month. We started October of 2019. It is currently December of 2020, and we will hit the 14,000 download mark this month, which is pretty good. That's top 50% of downloads, or top 50% of podcasts out there right now. But I think people are looking for more. If you look at podcasts as a whole, there's less than 1 million podcasts globally, and people listen to podcasts, I think it's 3 to 5 million times a day. So people run out of content. So don't be afraid to be the next guy with the next great thing, the next girl with the next great thing. But start with, who are you talking to? What are you going to talk about? What are the topics? What are the things? Do you want it to be just yourself? Do you want to co-host? Do you want to do interview style? All of it can be good. Just kind of decide ahead of time. I kind of went a number of different ways, because when I first started recording Big Stud Sales, Ryan was like going to be the initial guest, and then he turned into 65 episodes of guest. I think now I guess I can kind of call him a host, co-host. But from that perspective, I think it's super important to understand who you're talking to, what you want to educate them on, what you want them to take away from that. And really, it's like I talked about in previous videos, it's a really great way to grow a personal brand, because you can talk about what's going on in your life, what's going on around you, what's happening, what are you into, what are your hobbies, what are your interests, and just get people to understand who you are, what you're about, what you believe in, what your core values are, kind of how you go about running your life and your business is a great way to differentiate yourself and grow kind of that raving fan environment that people are just really excited about you, because I will tell you, I can attest some of my sales growth and some of my business growth to the podcast and YouTube channel, but I would say there's a lot that people just found me, engaged with a few episodes, whether podcast or YouTube channel. They started to like me, so they reached out, or they found me on Facebook, found me on Instagram, and then eventually they hire me. Because I'd say the average person spends about 3 to 6 months engaging with me prior to actually making a buying decision. And your clients are no different. Their decision-making process started probably way before you actually talked to them. And this is a great way to answer some of those questions they have early on in their decision-making process around what are their fears, what are their concerns, what are things that they're dealing with. So I suggest, and I think it's super powerful for anybody trying to build a personal brand or trying to differentiate themselves as a person or as a character, to create a podcast or a YouTube channel. It's worked really well for me, and I think it can work really well to help you grow your brand and ultimately